What can we expect when Chocolate City turns a lot more caramel and a lot more vanilla? New census figures show a demographic shift in the district's ethnic makeup. We'll look at what it means for our neighborhoods, our politics, our identity. Next on Evening Exchange. Hi, I'm Cassandra Clayton. The numbers came as somewhat a shock to the system. Blacks now account for just 50% of DC's population, down from 70% at its height in 1980. Tonight we'll look at how our city is changing and how those changes will affect you. We're joined by Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post columnist Colbert King, Maria Teresa Kumar, a founder of Voto Latino and a contributor to MSNBC, and Raj Kumar, who worked for the Clinton White House and is currently facilitating international aid through his organization, DevX. I want to start with you, Colby King. You're one of the rare species that we find in the district these days. Someone who was born here, raised here, went to Dunbar High, raised 3 children. Yeah. Did you have an emotional reaction when you heard that, we're just barely hanging on to that?
Absolutely
50%?
not. And I remember Washington when it was vanilla Washington. As a matter of fact, from 1800 to 1957, the black population was something in the order of 1/4 to 1/3. I remember when east of the river, Anacostia was predominantly white. Crestwood neighborhood in 1960 had 143 blacks. 10 years later, it was 48%. This is a constantly evolving city. Demographically, it's been changing constantly for the last 40, 50 years, and we're going to see changes in the future. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't surprise me at all. We've had changes for different reasons, but the numbers we see now, you could see the trend coming 10 years ago when you had an exodus of large numbers of black, middle class primarily, out of the city because of crime and crack and school system. This was inevitable that it would happen like this.
Raj and Maria Teresa, you are emblematic of the numbers of young, well-educated people who come to this city and stay for a while. Did you have any reaction to the numbers changing at all?
Well, I think with my work, we did a lot of census work. So I've been looking at the demographic changes across the country. So I wasn't surprised to see the boom in the Latino community in particular. But I think that something that Colby said is very important to discuss, and that is one of the reasons that we do see a lot of individuals moving out of the city is because it's increasingly not so much gentrification, but economic stratification. Mm-hmm. And in the last 10 years, DC has become incredibly expensive.
Where did you guys come from, and why'd you come here?
Well, I'm from New Jersey, and Maria Teresa's
What
from
did you
California.
call yourself earlier?
A Jersey Jew who grew up a little bit of his life in India.
Welcome to DC.
Complicated, as many people in DC are now. And I think Washington, for us, has been, like for so many other people, a place you came to study or to work.
You went to Georgetown?
Went to Georgetown as an undergrad, and I think Washington has become, in many ways, not just the capital of the United States, but the capital of the world. Mm-hmm. This is a place where people from all over the world come to work and to live, and it's a great place. And I think some people like us maybe come here thinking, I'll be here for a year or two, or be here to study and fall in love with the city, as we have. So I agree. I think that the bigger issue here is the economic exodus out of the city. It's just an expensive place to live. Parents who are having kids say, I don't know, can I afford to send my kids to a private school? Do I want to send them to public schools in the district? People who really feel constrained decide to move out to the suburbs, and I think that's mostly the story underlining these demographic shifts.
Yeah.
And the gentrification that's gone on. There is some bitterness or resentment among some blacks who do feel they're being pushed out by.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, I remember the first wave of change took place in my old neighborhood, the West End area of the city, or Foggy Bottom. In the 1950s and 60s. And you saw a change like that in the southwest part of Washington in the 50s. But that was a different kind of change. It was driven by something they call urban renewal, which turned out to be Negro removal, which, closing down low-income housing areas, particularly the alley dwellings or the row houses in Southwest, and forced relocation of people out of those areas, to be followed by pretty much middle-income whites who moved into those areas. And that was a different kind of change from what we're seeing now. What we have witnessed in the last 20 years has been not relocation driven by some other economic forces. We've talked about people who have voluntarily left the city because of conditions that they found in the city and their expectation of finding better conditions in the suburban areas. Some of us watched that trend start and said, wow, you go now, but you won't be able to come back because you're going to find the city is going to be economically beyond your reach. And that's what's really has happened to a lot of people.
What have you seen in your own neighborhoods as far as the changes?
Well, in my neighborhood, every house that comes up for sale is pretty much purchased by a white family.
And your neighborhood is?
I live near the Carter Barron Amphitheater near Rock Creek Park of 16th Street, and pretty much every house, every turnover is replaced by a white family.
That is interesting. What about you guys?
Well, when I first moved here, it was back in 1997 when I worked in Congress right after college, and I lived right on 16th and R, and not too far from Logan Circle. And Logan Circle at that time everything was boarded up. Nobody wanted to walk there. And all of a sudden, within the last 13 years, it's changed into a very dynamic area of town, but very similar. Who are the folks that came and bought those places up? And they were developers, and they brought in Whole Foods, and it became dynamic. But at the same time, there was a sense of loss that the city was changing, and was a change, and that progress.
These are the two sides of the gentrification coin. I think there's a great thing when parts of the city have really had a revival and been revitalized. There's new jobs and new economic growth, but it's a sad thing when you think that people are being priced out of their own city. And I can understand some resentment.
The other thing that is really the downside of this, and I watched it not only in the 50s in my old neighborhood in the 60s, but even now, there's an assumption that because a neighborhood is run down, that there's no cohesion there. And there's a lot of social cohesion in these neighborhoods. And when you break them up like they do, like they have been broken up, you are really getting at family units as well. You take something like the institution of the church. Was a time people walked to the church from the neighborhoods.
Sure.
Now you walk around the churches in our city on Sundays and look at the license plates, and most of them are from Maryland.
That's true.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So the city has really changed in ways that we have done ourselves. The argument that they are doing something to us, they have come in and they've done something, it doesn't quite hold up in the 90s and in the beginning of this century. Not like we were talking about in the 50s and 60s. The exodus was started by African Americans leaving, not being forced out, but going out looking for better opportunities. It's ironic, I think. Prince George's County executive, Jack Johnson, his wife was an employee of the district government before she got elected. For years, this is where she,
Right.
this is where she worked, and she took that income every 2 weeks back to Prince George's County. That's happened here in this city.
Now, we have recently seen the District of Columbia used as a bargaining chip in the budget negotiations. Do you think that maybe as we have a little more diversity, higher income, we can also get a little more political power or respect on the Hill?
My own view is that it's not so much racially connected. we suffered lack of representation in the Hill, lack of voting rights, even when this was a majority white city. The home rule movement started just before World War II, and they've been at it for some time. Part of it is this, Article 1 of the Constitution that gives Congress exclusive control. That's a fact of life. But
we know they didn't get everything right in the Constitution.
Well, they didn't. But this has gone up to the Supreme Court, and they have not seen fit to make any changes there. So what we're trying to do is, through the present effort, is to get greater budget autonomy, get representation in the House and hopefully in the Senate. There's even a talk about a statehood movement, which would take the district, of course, out of the relationship that we would have with Congress and have it as a separate state. There are pros and cons on that.
And I think that's one thing that many blacks who are still here worry about as young people come in, people of other ethnicities, that these newcomers won't care as much or work as hard for these issues that have been really important to DC for a very long time. Do you feel that?
I think it's a real problem because I don't think it's racial, I think it's economic. The city's becoming more income inequal. And so when you have that, what happens is the interests that people on one part of the city might have are going to be different from people in another part of the city. So how does the city government bring everybody together and say, these are citywide issues, these are citywide problems? If people in some neighborhoods can send all their kids to private school, that creates a very different ethos in the city.
Except that, and we saw this, I think, last year, it came out in our election. Some of the same people we're talking about who are new in the city start their families. It's expensive to send your kids to private schools. You say, well, let's make the public schools better. They have an interest in making the public schools better. Serves their interest. Suddenly they're vested in the city. Now that's where you have the real struggle taking place beneath the surface, but where do the resources go, what goes east of the river and what goes west and who's getting the most, but that's part of the political process.
And isn't the interest, though, in the public schools a good thing?
Yes, it is.
Everyone
Absolutely.
is bound
Yes,
to.
it is. Well, you find, if you want your neighborhood safe, get white people in it because they'll demand more cops. I mean,
It's just a fact of life.
I'm being kind of caustic there, but in fact, the emphasis on law enforcement in the neighborhood cops controlling that sort of follows with the gentrification. The bars go up in the windows, then the demand for police to come in, and suddenly there's a lot more police attention being paid to that neighborhood. Now, middle class African Americans demand the same thing, as would be middle class Latinos. I mean, and people know how to use their
Political power, exactly.
to get these outcomes. I think the mistake is to dwell on just the current situation and not realize that there's growth in these communities. I mean, the kids coming along now are not going to be the same kids that the people that their parents are. Kids are going to be smarter, better able to work the system, better able to demand for themselves. This is what I see coming along now, and just as the city changed dynamically in the early 20th century, and then moved on in the middle century, it's going to continue to change. It's going to become more diversified, be able to draw on resources that we've never drawn on before to help the city and help each other. I end up being very optimistic about our future because I think that we have in the city people who are much more thoughtful and knowledgeable about how things need to work.
I think that's very true, and I think what we saw with the Obama administration was a wave of young people coming in from all parts of the country because it was one of the few places they can find jobs. And not just to work for government, but in restaurants, and with that they also have the millennial generation has a different ethos as well of wanting to give back to their community.
That's
so I
what
think they're
I'm
much more
wondering.
active.
Do you guys, younger people, feel as connected in a civic way to the district?
First of all, I'm happy to be considered a younger person. This is great.
I'm like, I'm not going to take you into my staff. I'm going to crack up.
Fantastic.
How about to your neighborhood?
Pardon?
How about to your neighborhood, connected to your neighborhood?
Yeah, I don't think we're as connected to our neighborhood, is my guess, as people from earlier generations. And my reasoning for saying that is, like a lot of others, we've come in from other parts of the country. We've moved here. We live in this new world which is interconnected and global and friends from all over. I think it's a different generation. You talked about church and what it was like in the old days where people were really from one place, they all knew each other. I think that's changing not just in Washington, but around the country. We're a more mobile society. We're more interconnected through technology to friends who might be all over the world.
But I think, but that said, there's something, I mean, I spent my professional adulthood here in DC.
Yeah.
So there's a passion that I have for it. And, you know, there's always that pool. Raj and I always have this conversation. He's from Jersey, I'm from California. We always have that pool of, you know, DC or I say California, DC, California, or Jersey. But for me, that my professional and adulthood development, I always call them my terrible twos because no one tells you how to be an adult, right, in your 20s, happened here in DC. And that I will always carry with me. And for that reason, I always care deeply about DC as well.
But see, what happens, I think, over time is, you know, when you set down roots, you start to have a family, you suddenly become very vested in not only the city, but in your neighborhood, in your community, in your neighbors, and suddenly those other places are there, and this is home.
This is home, yeah.
And it changes the way in which you see the world around you.
And I'm optimistic too, as you are, about the young generation, about the diversity in the city. I think it's great for the city.
Do you feel that you connect to the Indian community? Do you connect to the Latino community?
Absolutely. There's a vibrant Indian community here in Washington, and it's a small network, but it's vibrant, and people know each other and get together. And I think the same is the case for the Latino community.
With Latino community, and the same with, I think, just young professionals, right? So there's always a swath when we go out to dinner that it's not just Latinos or Indians, but it's African Americans and Asian. I mean, it's a really, and I think it might be generational, but our friends are representative of the city in that respect too, and the professions that they come from too.
So my concern, I'm optimistic overall. My concern would be more the economic divide, right? That's where I see it becomes a group of people that have various diverse backgrounds, but they're all moving into one economic class. They're all on one path in this new information economy. They've got graduate degrees. They can get into this new, they get their hand on the next rung of the ladder. And those who are left behind, how do we make sure they're part of this conversation?
Right.
I want to ask Maria Teresa Kumar. She's very involved in getting out the Latino vote, getting them registered to the polls. What are you seeing nationwide trends? We know that Latinos are the largest minority now. How do you think it's going to impact the upcoming elections?
Well, the electoral map that we saw in 2008 is going to be very different now in 2012, just because of the new shift in electoral seats from the north to the south. And a lot had to do with the fact that Latino voters all of a sudden exploded in Texas and in North Carolina, South Carolina, places that Latinos really weren't before.
I've heard some people say that Texas could go Democratic. Eventually, maybe not in the next election.
Well, no, it's actually very close, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because there's a lot of individuals and a lot of organizations looking very closely at Texas. Texas has roughly 3 million Latino voters. Less than 500,000 voted in the last election. That's great potential. 2 congressional seats can go Latino, so they've gained 4. So people keep saying you have California and you have Texas, and you have a whole different ball game.
What about here in the district, though? At just about 9%. Do Hispanics wield any real political power here?
I think that in the last 10 years we've seen an exponential growth, and it's emblematic of what's happening in the rest of the country. The Latino community is still a young community, and they're starting to learn their power, and they're starting to build that infrastructure. So we may not see someone right away. We do have Josh Lopez running right now as a candidate, but we may not have someone right away in the district representing the community, but eventually we will. But I think what we need, though, is to identify an agenda that is a coalition building agenda, that Latino issues are American issues. What do the Latinos care about? They care about education. They want to keep their jobs, they want to keep their homes. And how do we start talking about those social safety net issues as well? And I think there's a great opportunity between Latinos and African Americans and recent immigrants to really build that power. And those are the conversations that we're not having, and those are the conversations we're missing.
That's what I was asking. Are we seeing those coalitions being built at all? Is there much movement among the different groups?
Well, I think the politics of the situation will force that to happen. I think if you're going to want to win in this city and want to win citywide, you're going to have to learn to work with coalition building. Because we're reaching the point where no one block can really deliver. You do have, take the last election, the mayoral election, look at how it broke down by wards versus the two leading candidates. The next candidate who comes around is going to have to say, how do I bring this all together? And make sure that my strategy includes getting votes out of Ward 3 as well as getting votes out of Ward 7. And whether you're Latino, or you're white, or you're African American, or you're Indian Jewish guy, I mean,
there's room for all of us in the district.
you're going to have to think. You're going to have to think more broadly in this city, as diversified as we are. And I think our politics will drive it, and our politicians, the good politicians, will recognize this and respond accordingly.
This is a positive development, I think. It's one of the upsides of the diversity, that it creates more competition in the political system. There isn't one block. So it means that voters get a chance to really pick candidates that they think are going to change the city in the right direction. And I think that competition is much more important than anything else we could focus on in terms of the change in
or
demographics.
And we will turn. People will coalesce around issues like, as you said, education.
Right.
Public safety, health care in the city. Those are issues that tend to be unifying. We have serious problems with on the revenue side of the picture. Those who are providing the taxes and the revenue to run the city, and that's where you have some other kind of tension in the city. Clearly around this mayor's budget, where he wants to raise $35 million from the highest income earners in the city to help close the budget deficit.
Good idea?
Well, it depends on where you're sitting.
Or will that run some of these young, affluent people away?
If you're in that area of $200,000 above income, you're not going to be very happy with that tax. On the other hand, if you are running a nonprofit organization and you're depending on the city for support to do what you need to do, you want to see that revenue come in, and you'll be happy with it. But it's a political balancing act, and the good politician will try to find his or her way through this thing. I think that I think this kind of tax, personally, I think a kind of tax is something you do as a last resort. It can have some disincentives as far as the taxpayer is concerned, as far as his investment in the city, staying with the city, confidence in the city. And I don't think that this mayor is in the best position now to do something like that politically.
Moving from the political to the cultural, do you feel we're losing something, or something is possibly at stake with the demographic shift? What are we in danger of losing in that culture of DC that so many blacks have identified with?
I hear that a lot. But that would imply that prior to this becoming a majority black city, that there was no culture in the African American community before, and that's not so. A rich culture existed here in the 1800s, in the early 20th century. In this very area where we're sitting right here, there was, when you had LeDroit Park, which was a gated community of whites, and you had Howard Town, which is just north of LeDroit Park, with professionals from Howard University. But they had a life that was very rich culturally.
So you don't see anything really being lost per se. It's just a numbers game.
You'll see changes. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it's actually, it enriches, because we are bringing folks from different backgrounds and that brings art and culture, and I think
great restaurants.
And great restaurants that we spoke earlier.
I don't ache when I drive along U Street.
Right.
I mean, U Street was our Broadway.
So you do feel a little something there.
Well, it's just a loss there.
Yeah.
I mean, that was our Easter. You go up there, you put on your Easter clothes, and this is where you paraded along U Street. I mean, this was the big thing. And we had restaurants there and night spots, and all the entertainers would come up there, and that's gone. I stood at corner 14th and U the other day, and I saw nothing but white people.
I know.
I never thought I'd see that in a lifetime.
It's changed in just
Well, let
a
me
few
ask you
years.
this: when will we see our next white mayor?
Who knows? I mean,
Who knows?
it's going to still come down to a who question.
Yeah.
Not, you know, the person who, we've had whites elected citywide before, not as mayor, but citywide. And so it's, you know, but it depends on the kind of candidate. It's going to have to be a good candidate to do it.
That's right.
Okay. So, what will we look like when the next census rolls around? More vanilla? More caramel? Add it to the chocolate swirl? Not sure. But I know this: the District of Columbia's roots are wide and deep, with a long history of fighting for freedom and voting and true representation. So, welcome, you newcomers. We need you in this fight. I want to thank our guests, Colbert I. King, Maria Teresa Kumar, and Raj Kumar, for sharing their unique perspectives on Evening Exchange. And to you, our viewers, thank you for joining us. Stay well and good night.